All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting edition of Two Men in Black and White. As you can see today, I am paying homage to those young children and the many lives lost in the state of Texas due to the Guadalupe River floods. I attended college in Texas for a couple of years. I also worked in the city of Dallas. So, I have been deep in the heart of Texas, and, I understand the incredible pain that they are going through from this severe flooding. And, it is just horrific. Now we've got a whole lot of finger pointing going on. It's just sad. And as me and my co-host were just talking, we feel like it's going to be another one of those kind of school shooting incidents. Nothing will change. Nothing will happen, until the next time. And then we'll talk about it again. We'll send thoughts and prayers, and still nothing will get done. All right, I'm joined now by the previously mentioned Brock Ganeles from the beautiful confines of Hudson River Valley, just north of New York City, with a look at what's going on in black and white. Brock, is what happened on the Guadalupe River magnified because of the loss of life of those children, because there were a lot of white lives that were lost? There were a lot of lives lost, period. But somehow it always comes back to race. And I see this in the comments on social media. It makes me ill. But I wanted to discuss it with you because I don't get it. Why do, the kids that were at Newtown were predominantly white, right? Kids at Parkland, right? Kids at Columbine, out in one of the very first shootings that we can remember. Right? Because we had media coverage, that you couldn't shake a stick at round the clock. And, when we have massive loss of life, we tend to look at who has perished. We've heard the Native community talk about all the women that have been lost that get no attention. I saw an amazing special on Hulu with Robin Roberts. Remember the Lacey Peterson case and Scott Peterson? There was another Latino family that was going through almost the exact same thing at the exact same time. And we never heard about that story. So we get caught up in the race of the victims. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I don't like it. If you're a parent, it hits you. If you're not a parent and you're just a good human being, it hits you, the loss of life of a child or anyone else in that circumstance who's sleeping one moment and the next moment they're fighting for their lives in a raging freaking storm and flash flood. It's unconscionable.
On this one, it's interesting. Gun violence now, there's such a standard playbook. You almost know exactly how it's going to play out, right? It's going to be, we need the new gun legislation from one side. Then there's going to be a little postmortem on who the analysis of who the shooter is. How did they get the gun? Did they post rantings on social media?
Yeah. Where's the manifesto?
Yeah, and then there's something, and then there'll be all this talk about how it's not the guns, we need to deal with mental health. We don't put another nickel into mental health, right? We cut health resources like we're doing nationally. So it all becomes bluster and BS, and it's almost like certainly the right wing is just playing for time until the story goes away. And in plane crashes and the flood like this, there's a little bit more technical analysis to do, right? The plane crash is the black box. So here's, you can do simulations of where the plane was and what could have happened and who could be at fault, right? There's a lot more at fault. And the shootings, who's at fault? The shooter. And then we try to sweep that away. But here, so there's so much finger pointing going on. It's unbelievable. Well, of course, the story, white death stories, white dominate society. They get higher ranking.
More attention.
Yeah, more attention on the situation and maybe more scrutiny on what went wrong. So right. I do see the significant amount of finger pointing, a lot of timelining, a lot of looking at where things could have done better, partially for some Trump-like politicians who just don't want to be blamed. So they're there's a search for someone else to blame, right?
Right.
Not to just thoughts and prayers. They know hasn't worked on this one. So because it was such a religious group of people but in the end, there'll be all this analysis. There'll be things that could have done differently, but no improvement will be made, right? No change will happen. No new resource or money will be put into this disaster preparation because we just took the money out of it. So we're
Right.
just like now going to start slowly playing our way to having this story fade with absolutely nothing,
Getting
no learning curve to come out of it. And, because as we talked about, a hurricane will hit and we'll be blindsided by it and we'll go through the exact same routine now. So this might
once
become
again.
the disaster routine now.
Right. The disaster
There's
playbook. Yeah.
fire, the disaster playbook. No one's going to put money to anything because we have a government right now that hates government. So therefore, it's rooting against bureaucracies or any, right? Federal workers are going to get purged today, 10,000 of them. So it's a zero learning curve. It's the idiocracy, right? This is the idiocracy. We'll just end up in a dumber place with more preventable lives lost, in a sadder place with just more families that just have a hole in their lives that there's not even close to ever getting back, right? Like, this is just the sadness of America. And they wonder why. Does anyone wonder in polling why Americans, like, don't feel good about the direction of the country? Like, how can you
Exactly.
possibly feel good about it?
Exactly. Well, Brock, and the loss of 100 plus lives doesn't change the mission of this government, right? It doesn't change, their mission statement. They are still out to enrich themselves, still out to, poach the people,
They
right?
won today. The Supreme Court upheld the firing of 10,000 federal workers. That's
Oh, did they? Okay, I missed it. Okay.
10,000 federal workers who we'd heard about being fired by Doji, but had been able to stay in their jobs because there
God
had
bless
been an
them. Yep.
injunction, on the legality of the mass firing. And the Supreme
Right.
Court, of course, what a shocker. I'm sure it was a 6-3 decision, right? I didn't see the stats
Wow.
on it.
Right.
Just today. So that's 10,000 jobs. That's 10,000 more people in that bureaucracy, that bloated bureaucracy sucking from the system,
Right.
who are non-essential,
Right. Who don't do anything.
who don't do anything, right? And then, but yet after a preventable death happens and we don't have the proper warning systems in place and the overnight staffing because we cut back, everyone's pointing fingers at somebody else when it's actually the people who cut the jobs that are now looking around for someone else to blame. I mean, it's
Right.
idiocracy.
Right. And here we go again. This will probably be blamed on DEI. We'll get around to that at some point. And it'll get it and we're forgetting this is deep red Texas. These are Trump's people. These are the people that are voting for Donald Trump. Texas, without question. Well, there was a time they thought it might be, in play with Beto
Yeah.
O'Rourke and all the momentum that he was able to somewhat push forward. But in the end, I don't think anybody thought Texas was going to go blue. And this is why these folks are conservative by nature down there. It runs throughout the state. And, you could look at Harris County, where Houston is located, and that metro area, but that might be the only real blue pocket in the state, if there is one. Some parts of Dallas, but not very many. And the money wins. Money is king in Dallas. There is a lot of money in Dallas and a lot of rich folks.
The differences between one of the differences between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, this now MAGA Project 2025 white supremacy autocracy movement that's going on is like in Trump 1.0, he would have gone down there and at least pretended.
Pretended.
To care. I mean, he's literally no-showed.
Yeah.
Right in the heart of
Playing golf.
in his country. Yeah, in his
Playing golf.
part of the country, right? His people, his most rabid supporters, right? A bunch of even religious camps, right? And kids. And he hasn't even lip serviced it. He can't even muster up faking
No.
caring anymore about
No.
other people. Now he's there letting Netanyahu stroke him about a Nobel Prize and talking about 50% tariffs on copper and doing other total bullshit. And like you said, golfed his way through several of the days. But really, literally, I mean, just a blatant no-show of absolutely nothing for the families. Not even a photo op. You'd think
No.
even on a cynical photo op, I would have expected. But his handlers now, they don't even try to tell him what the right thing to do is anymore.
No, why bother? But think about it, Brock. His other job is more important. He's obtained 40% of his wealth from the reporting that we have all over the place. All right, that's conservative networks and what we deem as left-leaning networks are saying that, yeah, this guy has made 40% of his net worth in 6 months. So his eye is on the prize. That's what he cares about. He cares about making sure that he's filthy rich when he leaves this office. Nobody's going to be asking him for a memoir. Nobody's giving him $10 million to pen his biography. It's all bullshit. It's all lies. So, we've got to figure out a way that people's lives start to matter more in this country. Right? Especially when it comes to, social justice, our medical practices, and the fact that, the Mandami thing, right? You got to check the box, right? You have to say whether or not you've been convicted of a crime. What nationality are you? You get like what, 4 choices? Black, white, non-Hispanic, black, Hispanic, white, non-Hispanic. Is that like the 6 choices? I mean, or Asian. And that's it. Like, what about the rest of the people? Where does everyone else check the box?
And what about if you're a blend? I mean, I find this
Right.
Mamdani story kind of really intriguing and interesting because there's so much criticism that he checked the box on a college application for African American, even though his father was, I think, first generation American citizen from Uganda.
Right.
So, by definition, I would think if that was your family, right, Mark? If that was you, you would be expected to check the box African American.
Correct.
So, was Mamdani expected to not check that box? Like, which box then was he supposed to check?
Right.
Like, and who creates the boxes? Like, you always got to go to the power structure. Like, who created the form? And I know maybe the implication is that he was trying to get a handout and get in through affirmative action or, advantage himself by saying he was African American.
Right.
Certainly not an advantage now. It's like you're more likely to be deported now if you say you're from certain countries because they're going after you one by one, right? God forbid you said you're Haitian American, right? Like, okay, so definitionally, we basically give people boxes that don't define them and then criticize them when they check a box that like is sort of maybe closest, right? The boxes obviously simplify life for quote white people because no one asks us, no one expects me to check a box of where I'm from, right? I'm not checking let's look at my ethnicity, Russian American. No one's calling me Russian American because my grandfather came from Russia. No one's calling me like Scottish or English American because the mother's side of the family came from there, right? I just get to check Caucasian or white. And then Hispanic, then it's what? Hispanic black, Hispanic non-black? Like, then what do you have to do? You have to, like, grade your skin tone? Like, is there some sort of test you're supposed to take on what your skin tone is exactly to decide which box to check? And what do you do if one parent is one and another is other? Like, those women's soccer players call themselves the espresso line, right? Like, where's the espresso box for
Brock,
them?
let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
The brown paper bag thing is a thing. My parents had to submit, a picture showing that their skin was lighter than the brown paper bag for certain colleges and universities. Those were the HBCUs.
You had to be darker than the brown paper bag to
You had
call
to be
yourself
lighter.
black?
You had to be lighter than the brown paper bag in order to get in because that meant you had some slave owner in you, in your lineage, right? So there were certain institutions that wouldn't allow dark-skinned African Americans into their universities. So that's not that far off. So you see where this stuff starts to come from.
I had no fucking idea of what you just told me is like absolutely. I had no idea that. I thought you were going the other direction where you had to be darker than the paper bag.
No, you had to be lighter. Right? Okay. Because the light-skinned African Americans on the plantations worked in the house. The darker ones,
the implication is they were whiter, so to speak.
Yes.
Therefore,
Okay. Learn something every day on this pod.
So I wonder. Okay, so let's just get back to why the question is even asked.
Right? Does it matter?
Now it gets me thinking about the census. Well, why are we asking? Why do we have to? Why are we putting down what our race is? And then it seems to be a blend of race and ethnicity, not just race, with the way the answers are. Because, race is a social construct anyway that's just created by society. And,
sure.
And ethnicity is a little different, right? It's kind of sort of what your heritage is or where you came from. But no one's, like I said, no one's asked me, do I check Jewish? Well, that's religion. I kind of feel it's my ethnicity. But then again, the family doesn't come from Israel. It comes from Russia, which would make me like East European.
Right.
I guess as an ethnicity. I mean, that box isn't on there. I guess no one cares because if you checked white, it was just like, okay, that's a category that we're not bothering with. We just want to shake out everybody else and find out exactly who they are. But the Mandani thing, the implication, there's an advantage. Now that we've stripped away affirmative action and DEI and all that shit, there's absolutely no advantage now to being not Caucasian. So there's no game to play for, oh, I can get in on shittier SAT scores because, blah, 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 affirmative action type of thing. Okay, so we've wiped all that out. So I
But
guess...
that's assuming there was an advantage to checking the black box.
Which
Was there ever an advantage?
White people think there's an advantage, right? They think they're getting screwed by that, right?
And I don't know
Absolutely.
why.
Right? That the things are getting taken away from them. But it was also a big issue with the Asian community, right? Because they felt like with the grades, like they're such high achievers and they're...
There was too many.
So, but now, in a Trump 2.0 white supremacy America, where there's certainly no advantage, there's no affirmative action, there's no DEI, why do we even still have these check boxes? Why are these questions even asked?
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck? Why does the government want to know? What's it matter to the government? If we're all just, it does even playing field, then why should we even tell the government what we are? And do we get to self-identify or not? Does somebody else get to decide that we checked the wrong box? And who's that person? Is that Stephen Miller? Is Stephen Miller sitting there? All these forms are coming across Stephen Miller's desk, and he's got a photo, and he's got like shit from Palantir, and he's looking at what you checked and deciding what box you're in, whether you go in the deportation pile or the you get to stay pile. I'm just questioning the whole construct of the question.
This takes us back 250 years, right?
Okay, take me back.
And so, we have to remember, like when you talked about the census, right? So for the census, we're deciding where resources are going, right? So we have to know who's getting those resources. Are these white Americans? Are these black Americans? This Asian Americans? We have to know where we're allocating our money. And the U.S. government has always said they know best. They know who should get this money, who needs it the most, and where it should be allocated. Right? And in order to do that, we have to know who we're giving it to, at least what they look like. If we don't know them by name, we at least know them by race and ethnicity. Because we understand that certain races and certain ethnicities won't have the same kind of values on these resources as others.
What decides race?
What decides it?
Yeah, what decides race?
Well, I mean, now... I think all you do is decide based on, the eyeball test.
So is it literally just color your skin? Like, why is Latino a race, or is it a heritage and an ethnicity? Is it a race?
No. And I believe Latinos will tell you that, there are Mexican Latinos, there are Central American Latinos, right? There are many, and there are Cuban Americans and they're all separate. Separate cultures, separate
there's a box for white, which is a race based on color. There's a box for black, but sometimes they call it African American. So if it's African American, well, there's white people being born in Africa that are African citizens that could come here and become citizens. So what happens when Mandamis? Why Elon Musk wouldn't he? Because he's white, he doesn't have to think white about ethnicity anymore. It's only black and brown people that have to categorize themselves.
Remember, we got that plane full of white Africans that came here, a month or two ago?
Yeah.
I guarantee you none of them checked the African American box and they checked the white box because they were going on the color of their skin. ICE is snatching people off the streets based on the color of their skin and even the language that they're speaking. I heard you speaking Spanish. Let's go. I mean, so we're not even trying to figure out anybody's bloodlines. I used to work with a woman, Suchita Vadlamani, who was from St. Louis. She was born in St. Louis. So while her family is South Asian, it really wouldn't matter, to the people in charge. They're calling her Asian, but not from China or Japan, right? South Asian. Most Americans don't even know there's a difference between brown Asians and lighter skinned Asians, right? They have no clue because we haven't taken the time to learn and understand different cultures. I think we're the only education system that, only wants to learn about European history. We don't learn about anything else, unless you major in it in college. That's the only way you're going to learn about other cultures, unless your parents teach it to you at home, right? You learned about Judaism at home, right? We didn't learn about those things at our high school, our public high school. You're not allowed to teach those things.
No, but it's all right. I don't think schools should be teaching religion.
Me neither.
That should
No,
be
absolutely
learned.
not.
That's a different choice. But I mean, history and religion are so intertwined, and it's hard to pull anything out from anything. But oh man, we could talk about this all day. But like the thing is that it's one of those things. Once you scratch the surface of it and go beneath a layer and start really thinking about it, you're kind of like, none of this shit really makes sense for any viable reason except for some sort of government control over resource allocation and a way to keep track of the others, right? Because it's the controlling group that's deciding the questions that are getting asked and really setting the rules and for society. So like, I mean, this is obviously just like a white America question because they've made it simple for white people, and then they've decided what box they need to put all these others in. But it's another place where as America gets more blended and more culturally diverse, I guess this just goes in the category of things that white America doesn't really want to think about and doesn't want to have to deal with. And so Stephen Miller will...
Right. Well, and how often do we call white Americans, right? We only talk about, we only have something in front of the American part when you're not white, right? Like Donald Trump's an American, but I'm African American. Why am I just not an American? We used to go through this with my son and his playing hockey when he was in high school. I said, Malcolm, you're a hockey player, just like everyone else. You're not a black hockey player. You're not a brown hockey player. You are a hockey player, just like every kid out there has on one pair of skates, one pair of glove, and one stick, just like you. Why do we have to put something on it? Why do we have to put some kind of nomenclature on every group, every ethnicity, except for white? We don't call Hillary Rodham Clinton a great white American. We call her a great American, right? We don't call John McCain a great white American. He's a war hero and a great American and a patriot. The word white never gets into the sentence or the description. So the description is only there for the others. Just like today we had, I read a blurb earlier today on NIH, where a program was cut because they were doing research on sickle cell, which is a disease that predominantly affects African Americans. So it was seen as DEI expenditure and eliminated, right? So remember, we had this whole debate right after George Floyd. All lives matter. We're not saying all lives don't matter. We're saying we just need help with the Black Lives Matter part, right? So the research that was being done at NIH, one of the world-class facilities and research centers in the world, is now going to be cut for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Make it make sense. And are we convinced it's not the racism yet? Absolutely not. And when you dig deeper into medicine, I shared this story with you off air just a few minutes ago. When I moved to Atlanta, I had been on the wrong blood pressure medication for about 6 years. And I still, struggle with high blood pressure. I'm doing everything I can to fight it, trying to stay mobile, trying to exercise regularly. I use a couple different supplements to control it, to keep it, in the area where it should be safe and not putting extra, pressure on my heart and on my cardio system. But I had an Ivy League trained African American doctor tell me to stop going to white doctors. First visit. And he said they don't take the time to understand your physiology and your makeup as a black man and the different things that you have to combat. So the blood pressure medication that the doctor had assigned me that was not the correct one was missing an ingredient. And so it had to have this extra ingredient in it in order for it to be effective for me. And I couldn't figure, I'm taking my medicine like I'm supposed to, like it says on the bottle. I can't understand why I can't control it. He's like, well, that's why. So, we have a long way to go with racial reckoning. And it's because this country was built on race, right? And separated by race. right? And from the very beginning, from the very start, right? And look no further than our penal system. And I'm the stickler about, the penal system and mass incarceration and warehousing people for profit. It's amazing to me that we do it better than anybody else in the world. And now we're putting it on showcase as we're building prisons, to nab 3,000 people a day. 3,000 people a day. Can you imagine? Just do the math. 3,000 times 365. That's our entire immigrant workforce. We may never get another vegetable if they achieve these numbers. We may never get another, good steak.
I heard an argument. Yeah, I heard the argument the other day as well, they really can't get due process when it's like that many people that are being, kind of, rounded up per day. And I'm like, well, that's the argument for not rounding up that many people per day. You shouldn't round up more than you can process within like the actual laws of our country. So maybe
Right.
that should be the mitigating factor of the roundups, because they're obviously sweeping up innocent people all the time. And my argument back was kind of like capital punishment, where it's like, if you're only right 9 out of 10 times, that 1 out of 10 is way too much. An innocent person just died. And it's the same with these immigration roundups. They're supposedly just getting the criminals, but no, you're getting just regular folks. So then that's just too many, right? So the whole system is broken then if innocent people's lives are being destroyed by it. And, but Stephen Miller, we have the zealots that sit behind Trump. Trump just wants raw meat for his base so he can stay in power, keep his corruption going. But the Stephen Millers of the world want to pick up the pace, build more of these prisons / concentration camps, because they're even kind of sub-prison conditions, right?
Right. Right.
Even worse, and fill them, build them and fill them, build them and fill them. And I guess that's why they still have these check boxes. These check boxes matter to Stephen Millers of the world, because it matters whether you're Caucasian or Black or Latino, right? Hey,
Yep.
It mattered in Nazi Germany,
Yep.
whether you were Jewish or Catholic or gypsy or disabled and all the other categories that sort of ended up dead. That's why the categorization's scary. That's why when I see the check boxes and I see the Mandani controversy, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think any good comes out of this.
No.
I think this is just a play to make sure you know where everyone is, for the groups in power to keep an eye on the others.
Yep.
So now I'm wary of it and I'm scared of it, and I don't want to, I don't think anyone should be checking any boxes ever again anymore.
Not at all. Not at all. And, again, and the hypocrisy of it all, I mean, this is a discussion for another day, but if the president doesn't have to check the box, why is anybody else coming home as a returning citizen? He's a convicted felon. Why didn't he have to check the box? And why do we allow a convicted felon, to be president of the United States, the greatest democracy in the world? Well, used to be.
He didn't have to check the box, but Kamala had to discuss like which box it was in and whether she was emphasizing one box versus the other box. And she's denying her Indian heritage, and
exactly,
is
it
she
became a thing.
African American, or like what is she now? Oh, what the fuck is she? Right? White people are like, oh, what the fuck is she? Too complicated to figure all this shit out, Right?
Right. Like that affects her ability to lead.
Yeah. Like there was no way to play it. There was no way she could play it, right? Either you weren't black enough, you weren't Asian enough, you were denying something, you were playing something up for advantage, you were saying you're black because you think that would help you, versus saying
this is
you're
what race does.
American, right? That's race. It was all built just so these games could be played.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Mandani checkbox thing really got my wheels spinning today, Mark, man.
I hear you, bro.
I want someone to get in the comments and tell me, what box was he supposed to check? I just want to fucking know what box he was supposed to check. What's the right box according to,
conventional wisdom?
76, America, right? What would the founders have wanted him to do?
Exactly. All right, buddy. Great chat, man. Always a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Let's crank this thing up and do it again tomorrow.
All right, Mark. All right.
All right,
we'll
buddy.
Talk some unity tomorrow. All right. Yeah. Always a pleasure. Okay.
God bless the folks in Texas, man. Peace.